Welcome to the House by Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek. Hello. And Sean.
I had something funny to say here after I saw the film, and I don't remember what it was now. Because I haven't had a chance to really... I've been working and stuff, so I've thought about it, but kind of left my mind aside from the conversations we've been having off camera with Carlos, friend of the site.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're discussing Us, the new movie from director Jordan Peele, his second feature film after Get Out, which we really enjoyed and gave high marks to when we reviewed that back in 2017. But this is his newest movie, Us, which just hit theaters this past weekend. And we will discuss it without spoilers at first and give general impressions and then move into spoilers. Because it's, once again, one of those movies where you don't really want to know what happened in it until you see it.
No.
Because there are some movies where a lot of the plot is kind of unimportant to what really goes on. Like a Fast and the Furious film. Nobody really cares about all the twists and turns.
Well, you know what
you just want to see a Ferrari flown or driven out of a airplane that then parachutes into a tank, and then the tank lands inside of a
submarine,
or whatever. But yeah, but this is a movie where you don't really want to know much about it. I mean, even some of the trailer stuff I think showed too much for this. I mean, that's every movie.
I'm sure people have probably seen the trailers or even just read like article spoiler headlines and stuff. I mean, the basic premise is, well, I don't want to say the full premise, but you know, it kind of starts as a home invasion film, but the home invaders look just like the family, the main family.
Well, there's a movie I was going to
interesting.
There's a movie I was going to reference. I'll reference it in spoilers because they have nothing to do with each other, but the plot's kind of similar in just theory, nothing else. But we'll talk about that. But it's got Hugh McGregor in it.
Ewan McGregor, but yeah. So the
episode 2, Attack the Clones.
Yeah. So
it's clones, right? The clones,
yeah.
Boba Fett,
they're us.
Django.
But the movie made an amazing like $70 million this weekend, so even above like the high end of expectations.
But I think he was I think with him doing, obviously Get Out, which was highly successful, and then you have him rebooting the Twilight Zone,
and
I just think there's a lot of hype around him. And two, the movie got good remarks from almost any.
It had 100%, which again, that doesn't mean perfect. It just means everybody at least found it favorable.
And now,
one thing too is I don't know. It's probably just because the nature of him being an actor first to most people, or, a sketch comedy actor and writer. But like, that's one thing where some directors really succeed. And this isn't him floating on it just because he has a face, but he's really getting out there and people know who he is. There's many directors that people don't know who directed, X-Men, you know what I mean? They know Bryan Singer because of allegations, but you know what I mean? Like, there's many films that come out. If you ask them
who directed Infinity War,
I mean,
there's plenty of people probably don't know what Michael Bay even looks like. They know the name.
Spielberg, like, there's not many directors you say, I'm like, yes, I know exactly what they look
what he looks like, everything. Yeah. The average person. Peele is turning into that and also turning out popular films.
He's only done 2 movies.
Yeah.
So, hey, Keanu, did he direct that?
No, he did not direct it.
Okay, he's directed 2 films.
But he's also, I think he wrote for Keanu.
Yes. I just couldn't remember. I know they were.
But the other big thing that Jordan Peele had going for him was, he was on Key and Peele for years.
Yeah.
And even if people didn't watch the show when it was broadcast on Comedy Central,
seen it on something.
You've seen the sketches because they're all, mostly all of them are on YouTube. You've probably seen them shared there or Facebook.
There's been memes
and now he is the host of the Twilight Zone series, which
he'll be the face
that
of the
CBS All Access is not going to be to everybody.
Yeah.
But there was a Super Bowl ad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, he's kind of
most people of every age range. From like 80 to whatever,
have seen something
or there's going to be interested in Twilight Zone.
And I think that
always garners interest.
Yeah, and I think that the point I was making is that really helps something like Us, which is an original film idea, get those box office numbers because it is not just, a franchise. Like, even though this wasn't a preconceived ideal or whatever, like, people know who he is. And a lot of times these original horror films, like, let's just say Hereditary. You know what I mean? Hereditary or something, people have no idea. They just know the trailer and that's all they care about. With this film, people just said, hey, I know who Jordan Peele is. I like Get Out.
Get Out guy is making this movie that...
Get Out, man.
Yeah. And like the biggest differences I can say, without spoiling any like the actual story elements, like the differences between like Get Out and Us... I do remember people saying, like, early on before I'd even seen this, like, the people's, like, cryptic, like, tweets or whatever before the embargoes were lifted or whatever, was just saying, Get Out was Well, there's a stupid inane discussion about, is this a horror movie or not?
Yeah.
This is not a horror movie.
Anything's
This
a
does
horror
not,
movie.
The guy doesn't wear a mask and stab someone. I mean, come on. Like, if you take away a lot of like the 80s movies that people love that they profess are horror films, like New Year's Evil, is that any more of a horror film than Get Out?
Think of a more horrific scene than Dumb and Dumber when the toilet jams up and he takes a crap. And it happens in real life. Anything's a horror movie.
It's just the music used.
Yeah.
Well, you just change the music.
It's like real tense music. You're like, oh my God.
The music from The Shining. And
yeah. Like, that's the thing. Horror is whatever you want it to be.
So what was your point, William? I think I know where you're going, but I want to...
The point was, like, early impressions were saying that it was more of a genre film than Get Out. Like, Get Out was a thriller that had different elements in it, and that, you know, you kind of found out the story as you went along, but it didn't really have any kind of out of left field or kind of genre moments. It played more of as a straight movie, whereas Get Out, or Us, is one where the early impressions at least are saying, like, yeah, it's a little bit more tilted in the direction of, like, beyond. It's not so straightforward, and
you have your horror films that deal with dread and maybe situational horror, and you got your stabby ones.
Yeah.
This is closer to a stabby than Get Out.
Well,
you know, that's basically the difference there. There is blood to be shed.
There's a lot of stabby moments, and there's some like pretty decent like gore or, you know, death type moments. Nothing that's really setting the world on fire or anything. That's,
I feel like the gore all could have been, you know, shown on TV, like PG, not PG-13 because of the way people are with you know,
it's definitely
blood requirements.
It could have been on AMC.
Yeah, for sure.
It could have, you know, not even the level of HBO really.
Oh, I mean, I've seen worse stuff on CSI and stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
That's what we always bring up, like, or like your favorite show ever, Hannibal.
Well, Hannibal, I'm just surprised that got away with what it did. But so like the movie doesn't really have anything that goes really far in that direction. Like, there's not, you know, Tom Savini-esque effects, somebody's like head getting split open or something. And there's no like nudity or gratuitous like content of that nature. Because when you watch there's a lot of movies you watch and you come away, it's like, really, did this have to be rated like not PG-13? But I think the thing that's really stupid with the way they handle a lot of the ratings for horror stuff is two movies. One categorizes action and one categorizes horror. One can get the PG-13 and the other gets the R, simply because, like, oh, this is intended to create dread versus this is intended for thrills or fun. So the movie is rated R, but I guess it's language that put them over the top.
Yeah, I'm sure, probably.
But if you had changed, if you had tweaked that, this is not a movie that'd be that difficult to get onto like a cable network like FX.
Maybe the use of a certain song at a certain moment. Probably there was multiple F-bombs dropped in one moment.
Oh, that's right.
You can't take that out of this movie.
Yeah, that's right.
What are they going to do for a TV version?
Well, if you have like so like diegetic music is when something in the movie or show happens.
Yeah.
Where the music plays and then it plays out in like the scene. So there's diegetic music in it, but I guess they could edit in the edited version.
But man, that's just going to soften the blow. Again, that's, you know, he didn't. I don't have anything against like the overuse of gore, but you know, he did as much gore as he needed. He didn't overdo it, and the R-ratedness of it. You know what I mean? Like that song, that moment, that was worth the use, and was just pitch perfect. You know, it's not dropping F-bombs just to drop F-bombs.
So it's not Limp Bizkit.
Yeah. It's not, you know, as much as I love Clerks, you know, it's not Clerks either. Where
but the cast, you have Lupita Nyong'o, who's been in a ton of stuff in recent years. You know, she was in Black Panther, and then it also has Winston Duke, who is in Black Panther.
And she's never been a lead until now.
Yeah,
she's also in Star Wars.
She was in Star Wars as Maz Kanata. Then you have Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker. And then the kids, probably pronounced this incorrectly, Shahidi Wright Joseph and Evan Alex play the daughter and son of Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke's
what's the daughter's name? I know the son's Jason.
Zora.
Yeah.
And then the son is Jason.
His name is Jason, and he wears a mask.
Yeah, and then Lupita's character is Adelaide, and then Winston Duke's is Gabe. And then, you know, just like Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker, like some other friends. And I mean, you have some other characters that appear throughout, but it's mostly just focused on the main family unit of, you know, the two parents and then the two kids and what they encounter. So like the performances are great. Like Lupita Nyong'o just gives like a great layered performance and does like, because Nick, as you mentioned, like there's the invaders that look like the family that are being invaded. So the performance there is just like two completely different characters. A lot of back and forth, and there's even a moment where I'll save it for spoilers, like where a character in the course of like one scene goes through like two huge range of emotions in under a minute. I was like, that's pretty impressive. Like,
yeah, there's some great tonal shifts in this, and this is broad stuff. There's sometimes when I was laughing so hard that I was like, wait, I need to stop laughing because this is now already shifted into something that's supposed to be scary. It was like such a weird thing. Like I enjoyed it, but it was different than say a Sam Raimi where it feels like, oh, this is all kind of fun.
Well, yeah, 'cause
this is really like, this is really funny, but this is also really horrible. Like a scary thing happening. It was a different type of horror comedy in some elements than
it seemed a lot. Well, you see, like with Evil Dead outside of the original, when you get into there's always this kind of like
slapstick,
the whole thing,
everything.
Yeah.
There's really not any moment that's actually serious.
Well, there's just a lot of visual sight gags and things, as opposed to this. I'd say it's more like, so Get Out and this both have, like they have serious moments that are intercut with, humorous interactions between characters or the reaction to something is humorous. And I think that is something that benefits most films. And this one, I think it does too, because you ratchet that tension up. And if you just keep the tension ratcheted up for an hour straight, that can be pretty tiring and not enjoyable. So to have that tension ratcheted up and then to kind of deflate it a little bit with like some humorous stuff and then to ratchet it back up again. So you kind of give like, a little bit of breathing room and you feel like, okay, here's a down moment. But then sometimes when you think that, stuff happens.
People coming out of, I'm already forgetting where this, South by Southwest. Is that where it's screened, right? It was opening,
I believe so.
Opening film. They said, they were liking him to Spielberg. Now, I can see specifically why on some of that, because Spielberg, you just think even like Jurassic Park or Jaws, they do those tonal shifts.
Yeah.
It's not as hard on the comedy as this is from Peele, I think. But they definitely do those kind of waves of motion like you talked about, William, where, there would be a lot of tension and then a release, and a lot of tension and then a release. And it really was a roller coaster kind of ride. And also, too, the family dynamic. I think that's another thing, too, is it feels very like Poltergeist, that family.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say, oh, this is like the best family since Poltergeist or whatever. And I think just the family unit in this was what was fun about it. And it was the performances led to making the family extremely likable. And that kind of is different than, most horror films, home invasion and all that, I never really like the characters all that much.
I think that's something
and I think
that's
probably the biggest strength in my mind to this, as far as just if you're watching it just as an enjoyable film.
They weren't fodder. These people were developed. They weren't fodder for whatever horrific event was going on.
Yeah.
Because like Last House on the Left,
they're just vestiges for the events, not really
that's
like
it.
a
Like,
family you like.
or
you want to
like
see more
even
screen time.
strangers, like it's just kind of like they were just kind of fodder.
Yeah, because what I'd say is like, if you've seen the trailers or seen like little bits and pieces or maybe like TV spots or the little social media ads that are like 15, 30 seconds. There are parts of the movie that play like home invasion. But the movie definitely doesn't stick to that trope. That's part of it, but there's multiple locations and there's a much larger story going on behind the scenes.
I think that it was good to sell on that because you're probably get a lot more people to come watch.
You give somebody a relatable. It's like, okay, here's how it starts out. You can relate to this,
and they had flash because it's a known quantity. Something familiar but different is what everybody always wants. They want something they kind of know, but also not too much of the same. But too, they gave so many good flashes in the trailers of different locations, the beach location with a guy standing there with like, a bloody hand or something. And then, a car on fire. There's a little shot of that. Like they let you know that it wasn't going to be inside of a house the entire time, which
can be tiring.
Which probably would have turned some people away if they thought, I don't want to see. I'm kind of good with that.
Change the location, makes it nice, makes it feel I don't know, because a lot of times you just kind of feel like you don't accomplish anything. And like the house in this was big but wasn't huge. But it's like you don't want to just run around a house the entire time. That just gets kind of mentally fatiguing at some point. It's like, well, just leave.
Yeah. You're watching a movie. You want to, if the budget allows it, you want to go places. You want to see, Well,
I just think one thing I really like that he's done in both of his films is like just the character dynamics. It's like everybody's very good. Like, even the ones that are, maybe not as much in this as in Get Out, but like everybody's flushed out. You know who they are. You get a good sense of it, and I just think that's something that's really hard to do because a lot of movies can't usually get that down, where they can get certain elements, but not all of it, and you don't see it.
You just, it's almost like every bit part in all these films, it's like, that was well casted. Whatever glimpse of that character we saw, that was well done. Like, it seems like he is I would say his strengths are in writing and directing actors. Visually, I think he's great, but I think he probably has some room to grow there as far as maybe having. He's very specific about set dressing and all those things. You know what I mean? Like, people pointed out all the clues set out in this film to kind of lead you to either know, what's going to happen in the even at the end of the first act or the second act or whatever. But I think maybe he'll never be interested in that. But there's just, I don't know. I can't really put it into words, but some directors maybe direct where thematically the camera does some of the work too, and his is visually beautiful and everything like that, and it is definitely distinctive, but I feel like I could see his directing style change more over time versus his writing, and he's at top of the game, I think, as far as directing actors.
I mean,
he does great. I wonder though too, like a lot of comedic actors, and you see this too, because like you see comedic actors that are really good at being dramatic. And I wonder too, because like comedy, like the more I listen to like Conan O'Brien's podcast and you start hearing a little more in depth about comedy and stuff, I wonder because comedy is such an exact science. To get it right. Because like anybody, from what I understand, can usually do dramatic, but not everybody can do comedy. So I wonder, like, from him being a primarily comedic background, if he's just better at, because you have to have everything go right for a scene to be funny.
Well, yeah, I think.
And like horror, even if the scene doesn't really work, you can still get something out of it because you have a horrific creature after you, or you just have some type of terrible imagery, but nothing else really works. There's a lot of horror movies that will be in a theater, and the setup's kind of poor, but it still delivers because you have a nun, or you have... Yeah, I'm not picking on that.
And that's what people are like, that's cool. Like. Something.
But something like this is like everything's orchestrated, everything has a point, there's something there to it, and it all works. Whereas like a lot of movies just kind of like, here's a thing, and it's going to go after you.
Yeah, what kind of monster can we make? Yeah, okay, let's throw a family into that.
Like that. Yes, yeah. And so, and I'm not picking on those movies because they obviously worked, but it's just
they come from a different place of creation.
But you can be a little bit sloppier with them, and you don't really notice it or care.
Well, I just remember like when I was in the theater seeing it, I think there was some lady, like a few in the same row, that I could still hear, and she's like freaking out whenever the clown was on screen. It's like, oh, it's a clown, and just like viscerally, like in a visceral reaction, like having that right there in the moment. So into like like a difference is like, so by the end of Get Out,
there's a clown.
Like once Get Out got to its conclusion and had like its big moments, like people in the theater I was in were actually like clapping.
Yes.
And this movie did not have that reaction. This movie.
This was a different movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different style of movie. I was trying to think of like where, like, and this isn't really meant as an insult, but I think it's more of like the storytelling on display here. To me, like a lot of people are saying Spielberg. So someone else that was compared to Spielberg a lot back in the day was M. Night Shyamalan. And this movie feels more in that wheelhouse. Yeah. Because at the end of the movie, you're like, well, wait a minute. And you kind of walk backwards through it. Because I think it's a movie that the first time you watch it, a lot of the, thematic elements hit you and you get like the literal meaning of what happened. But then once you think about logistically and logically what all that entailed, then it's a little bit more like, wait a minute, how did this do that? So there's a little bit of that type of stuff that if somebody, if you're somebody that just can't stand any nitpicky details not being 100% made clear and lined out for you, that could be problematic.
And too, it's like sometimes though, do you want the film to pump the brakes and explain everything away? Like me personally, I normally don't get hung up on that too much on that stuff. And it's, Star Wars, I don't care if they stop and tell me how hyperspace works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and I understand if some people go into films a certain way and that's what they're looking for out of it. But
sometimes I think it's more fun to like do research on it and theorize and have your own.
Yeah.
And like that's a part of it that makes it fun because I like it both ways. Like I like it to be force fed to me and just like explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old. But then again, like something like Prometheus is a little bit more fun because it wasn't really exact. Whereas like this kind of falls in that camp of like you could really kind of think whatever you want, maybe, you know.
If a film feels hollow and it feels like there's nothing else to it other than them setting up a reality and explaining it, but like it feels like there's nothing else to the film but that, and that falls short, then I hold it accountable. But if the film is held up by so many other things, I don't really concern myself with logistics too much. You know what I mean? Like that, I think there's kind of like a seesaw, and it teeters. And if it teeters one way, then I'm totally fine, and I'm along for the ride.
This is one of those movies, like, I enjoyed it, but it's just funny because at the end of the movie, if like somebody said that was the best movie I've seen, or like that was trash, I'm like, I get it, like, because I can understand certain groups of people are not going to like the ending because that is a horror thing.
Or they're not going to like kind of the whole premise.
Like,
you know, once you get,
I loved Mandy, but as much as I that movie, like, that movie's awful. Like, I kind of get that a lumberjack that creates his own axe and goes after Hellraiser. Like, I get it.
And to the point, I would say that if they were mad at it, I could see it, but I don't see how you would like necessarily hate all the film unless one thing drives you crazy and it ruins everything else, because so much of this film is handled so well. Again, the acting, directing, the casting,
I just
all
think
of that.
Like a lot of movies in horror, almost more so than any of them, it's just like which I had no issue with the ending, but a lot of people, sometimes it gets to the ending, they don't get the resolution they want, or they want to have a Avengers-esque ending where, you know, everything's resolved and everything is, you know, here's what it is. And you don't always get that.
I think that the problem with horror, and I've seen a lot of people say that they love the first 2/3 of this film, but just, you know, didn't.
Our friend Carlos was saying.
Yeah, he had said that. I've seen like a number of other people say on Facebook.
It's in the same camp as that, because like It Follows one of those movies that like I could see people liking the first 2/3 and then the third act.
Yeah, because It Follows, everybody kind of like a number of the responses to that were just like, oh, the third act, it was so unrealistic that they played Home Alone. You know, in this movie.
Too, honestly, Get Out, I'm surprised that it didn't turn off more people than it did, and the revelations came of that. Because when I saw it, I thought, whoa, I wasn't expecting this
specific
this specific reality of what's happening in this film. You know what I mean? Like,
I think
and I was surprised that nobody had whiplash from that. I didn't at all, but that seemed like something could have upset some people. And this, for me, is the same vein of that.
It was so well done.
Yeah, I think a difference. I think people, so with Get Out, because I saw somebody say on Facebook, who was saying, I forget who said it, but they're like, if this is what equality looks like, meaning I get to watch movies that finally have like a black family, African-American family on screen doing the same dumb crap the white families have been doing in these movies for 30 years, and I guess that's a step of progress or something. So I guess like what they meant was, you know, with just interpreting, and I saw that comment from a number of people, even like in comment sections, like on major articles, people saying something to that same effect. And I think that was just saying like a lot of times in movies, there's not great representation. So that's why whenever there is, like, you know, Black Panther was a big deal when it came out because it was a superhero film that actually had a budget. Because, you know, like Blade was a movie that had Wesley Snipes as the lead, but it wasn't really about a social issue. It was just a dude that kills vampires.
Yeah, but at that point in time, they weren't tackling that. Now, Blade nowadays may be treated.
And also, too, some of the people I follow were talking about, they were happy that, you know, that there's just a plain black family.
And it's not about the national identity or the...
Well, not even that. They're just saying a black family in the lead role of a, you know, of a horror film like this, and another specific thing, they were talking about how the mother isn't like a mixed or lighter skinned, even black. You know what I mean? They're like, when have we had? And they were talking about last time they could think of it, of having like a dark skinned mom was the first mother from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. They're like, are you serious? Has it been that long? You know, I don't really specifically know, but these are a lot of people talking about it.
Because there's a difference between. So, you know, even though Get Out was a big deal, you had, you know,
it was mostly a white cast.
It was a white cast with the, you know, black lead. And that's different than this movie where the family, you know, the main family we're centering on, you know, and they just exist. It's not like they're friends that they're meeting at the lake or the beach or whatever. They're white. I mean, there's no real social element to it. It's just that they are the family and that they're the lead characters. And it's just something, it doesn't seem like happens very often.
And, I heard some people saying, like, getting emotional, like, damn, now I see how, you know, I can't believe like white people or whatever just feel like this every time when they see a movie. You know what I mean? And honestly, it's like, I don't feel like that because I don't think about it. Because that's all we see.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You go in,
which is not a good thing. Like, I enjoy the different flavor of seeing a different family, even though the family seems just like mine. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't anything specific. It was just...
Well, I do like too though that like a lot of times like they were just normal. He didn't do any tropes or like, you know, it didn't go into any of that. It was just they were normal.
Yeah. I'm just smiling thinking about the family because I love the dad in this too.
Yeah,
he is so goofy
Winston
and
Duke,
funny. Yeah,
is Gabe. So watching him do kind of a 180 going from Black Panther, where he's like this badass warrior guy, you know, or I think it's Infinity War too, in like some small roles. So watching him go from kind of like badass Wakanda warrior to
I mean, he's goofier than.
So some people are saying they thought that he was kind of channeling Jordan Peele from like when he's doing his. But I mean,
he reminded me. Did you guys see the second Ninja Turtle movie? Is the most recent one. Tyler Perry plays Baxter Stockman. He seemed like a toned down version of that, like kind of a nerdy, you know, like but he's like kind of nerdy, but like a big dude.
He's a big intimidating guy. But he's kind of a doofus.
Yeah, you normally see like big nerds.
So you know, part of that too is, you know, regardless of race or whatever, you know, working in the business world, I've met a lot of guys. I think that, you know, bigger, imposing physically guys that are just kind of like these warm, friendly people that. You know, kind of goofy and, you know, kind of lovable guys. And that's kind of regardless of any racial identity thing. It's just his character or somebody I was like, oh, that's, you know, because I saw somebody complaining that he wasn't like people were complaining he wasn't masculine enough in the movie. And I was like, well, here's the thing. I think they said that they did try to get him to tone down the muscle mass and stuff for this movie from Black Panther.
Anyway, because the Ultimate Warrior and just because
otherwise, if anybody comes in super shredded, it doesn't make a ton of sense. They're not just destroying everybody in a physical confrontation.
Yeah, but he's a big guy anyway.
So I mean, he still was in great shape and was all that stuff. But they made him a believable character because I knew a number of people in the business world that like were former college athletes and stuff. That were, you know, like similar size to him and stuff, but just as affable and goofy and stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, he had moments where he accomplished, you know, pretty impressive things or pulled stuff off. But, you know, like the driving force in this movie was his wife, you know, Adelaide, where she was the main driving force behind everything. And it kind of seemed throughout that, you know, she knew something. Just because she had this experience, like the movie opens with her having like a childhood experience, and that kind of informs all of her character development.
So we're at the 33 mark, or it's 3:33. We got to get off here now at 4. So do we want to just start going into spoilers? Just kind of wrap this up.
We can wrap up what our thoughts are,
because we could talk for 4 hours about this, but fortunately we got limited time today.
Yeah, because of all kinds of stuff going on. So giving this movie a score out of 10, it's somewhat difficult because I've seen a lot of people say, you know, and it's with any movie that's like horror that gets well reviewed. You get people say it's a modern masterpiece and it's one of the best horror films of all time. 10 out of 10. You see a lot of 1 out of 10 say crap, super crap, hate it worse than anything else. I think that having seen it once, I'll probably see it again because Julie didn't get to see it with me. I know she wants to see it. Like once through, it's like a 7 or 8, as opposed to like Get Out to me was like a 9. You know, I don't really give things 10s very often, but it was a 9. It was a solid 9. This is more of like a 7, 8. So still really good, enjoyable. Just, you know, more elements that at the end that they didn't really all hang together to make a super coherent experience. But, you know, still an enjoyable as hell movie. And one that I definitely think that rewatches could reshape the way that's thought about, because a lot of people now have this immediate reactionary stuff as opposed to The Shining. You know, I'm sure the perception of that in 1980 is vastly different, 10 years later.
And man, like this film seems like something people could turn around on, you know, super quick, like more quickly than The Shining, something like that. You know what I mean? I feel like this, of all films, people often say that, like, well, I've only seen it once, so I've got to figure out how to feel. This one there hasn't really been a film that applies to so heavily in a long time that I can think of. You know what I mean? Versus this one. Like, I definitely think my rewatches will change my opinion on this.
Because it's a movie, too.
Or solidify it. I don't know.
Because, like, what was the movie? Shutter Island. Like, it's a movie where once you watch it once and you go back and rewatch, it's like, well, how does it hang together? Does it hang together? In some cases, those types of movies do, and it improves the experience. You enjoy it even more because you see foreshadowing and stuff you didn't realize was there at the beginning. But some movies you watch it a second time, is like, this just completely falls apart. This just comes out of nowhere.
Batman Dark Knight Rises or whatever for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same with you. I mean, I would give it like a 7. I enjoyed it. It was not the same experience I got with Get Out. I just think, to me...
And I'm glad he's doing different flavors.
Yeah, no, I'm glad he is. Yeah. And I don't want to keep comparing it because it is a different movie. But it's
the director's filmography.
But, you know, it's one of those things where, like, I get both ends of the spectrum where people are like, oh, this is terrible. Because usually there's a lot of times where endings like this, like, I don't usually like, you know... stuff like that. Where I like the way the film. I kind of agree that the third act I wasn't as big on as the other two, but. Overall, I mean, I was pretty happy with it. I think, again, though, I just think he has a really good knack for developing, like, characters.
Well, just enjoyable characters.
That is something, too, that I think just makes, even if the movie wasn't, even if the plot was terrible, but everybody was still the same way, like, it would be an enjoyable
because even if the third act doesn't land as well, you like enough of the characters so that you still enjoy what's going on.
And I think that is one thing that gets lost in a lot of horror movies, especially these schlocky gore fests, because they don't develop characters at all, and it does hurt the film overall. And some of that's with acting. But yeah, I'm right with you. I would give it a 7.
Yeah, and before I jump into this too, my favorite recap of the analysis of this film. It's kind of a clickbait title, but because it's about the entire film.
Yeah,
it's from shadownact.com, and the title is "The Ending of Jordan Peele's Us Explained." But that has had my favorite breakdown so far. It's the first one I came across because I follow that site, and I just saved it until I had seen the film. But I've read several other ones too, and I think that one is the most in depth, and I think I don't know. Some of the recaps have been pretty broad, and it's like, okay, yeah, you didn't tell me anything I didn't see.
Yeah, you just
let me know something new. Yeah,
you literally just put in text what happened on screen.
Yes,
this happened.
And the perspective of this website, it is a website dedicated to cinema, television, and web content of Africa and its global diaspora. Like I said, great analysis. For me, like, I had just a great time with this family. I almost wanted to see them more, the family dynamic more in the film, even though we got to see them a lot. You know what I mean? It's not like they, you know, I was satisfied in what I got, but I love them so much. I just wanted. I mean, I wanted the journey to continue with this family. I don't want a sequel.
I would have almost enjoyed just seeing them in like a family comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a huge compliment to the character work in anything.
No, I agree too. Kind of, like a vacation movie or just anything would have been fun.
And just the opening acts are or opening scenes and stuff, and the first act is just so strong. And obviously tonally different, because normally in these films it's the happy moments with the family, and then and in the end, obviously the world has been turned upside down. So for me, I'd probably give it, like, I was thinking like an 8.5, maybe 9. I do give films 10 quite a bit. I gave Get Out a 10. Mine could change on this a lot. I will say where I don't know if it will, ever hit like the highest level for me is that it's just not my favorite type of horror film. Only because I think some of it is just, I don't know, I guess specifically genre heavy.
Well, there is a bit
I like that stuff, but there's just kind of the broad elements of it that are fine. They're all good and well, but again, I know I've tooted this horn, but like one of my favorite horror films of the past few years is Killing of the Sacred Deer, and that is like as unconventional as you can get. And I get if people don't say, is that a horror film?
Yeah.
But for me, like, and that film has no logic at all. But that's just kind of like where I find the most enjoyment and the most interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But thematically, I think this is like deeply, deeply interesting. Like, I don't really care about the logistics too much of everything that turns out, only because I just don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. But I will say I totally get how you could simply look at this and say, well, that doesn't really check out on some level. But also, I don't put it past him to kind of have mapped things out in his mind on some of these answers.
Have a detailed description of
a good horror movie, though. To me, doesn't have everybody leaving happy at the end.
Yeah,
because if you made a good horror movie and then you don't have that, because I think every good horror movie, to me, at the very end, you have people that are completely split.
Yeah,
and because I've never been like a horror movie where everybody's like, oh, I'm really happy.
Well,
with that.
So, I mean,
then it's just it's a mediocre.
Well, I think for whenever but like I do remember Get Out, people generally came out feeling pumped.
Yeah.
There was like the older couple that was like, I don't know what that was.
But I think that was probably the film
you had to
as
have
a whole.
At least one of them, because if I go to a movie that everybody likes, then I just think that like it didn't do enough.
Well, I mean, like I've been
because sometimes you're in a slanted audience, and whatever, he could literally come out and just fart in the microphone. People be like, you know what I'm saying? So you can't always go off of that. Because like you go to an Avengers movie, and everybody there is going to think it's just the best thing ever. I mean,
I don't know. There's still people who are seething with rage in their seat.
But
so I guess
so. Just real quick, this is not. I think it's not my favorite flavor of horror. So on those regards, it may never, but I still think this blows most everything else out of the water.
Well, I mean,
like the past 5 years, this is probably like, in my top 5 horror films of the past 5 years.
I enjoy this more than Halloween.
And this definitely, and this, with Jordan Peele being involved with the Twilight Zone, like I definitely got a little bit of that vibe out of this.
Yeah, this felt like a Twilight Zone.
I think that does give me a lot of trust in his involvement with that, kind of exploring these different topics.
I'm actually more excited for Twilight Zone now. So I was trying to rack anything else in my brain real quick before we move on to spoilers, but yeah, I had such a good time in the theater with this film. But I think, again, like thematically, or at least just how some of the ending was presented with the climax, some of that I was like, that didn't really hit a home run with me on kind of, let's just say the climax of where things go with Red, her shadow, and all that stuff. Story-wise, I was totally fine, but just maybe how it played out on camera, I was kind of like, oh, that's fine, but I feel like there could have been a different way that would have been more satisfying.
Yeah.
But we can go on to spoilers now. So definitely jump out. I say skip all the social media stuff.
Yeah.
Just find us online.
If you haven't seen the movie too, like don't read up on it too much. Just go see it.
I mean, because you're going to be spoiling yourself, even if you end up hating it. You got to go in with a pure vision. Yeah. Because then it'll always be soiled.
And two, like I am a big believer in going into a movie knowing as little as I can.
I like knowing as much as I can.
I think for this movie, I barely watched any of the trailers whatsoever. I just like stuff would pop up and you couldn't really avoid it.
See, if I just look at it, if I'm giving my money, like I want to know that I'm going to.
My main thing is I look in who's doing it.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff.
Because you can't always look at plot too. I mean, Drive doesn't have a bad plot, but I was thinking about that the other day because I know you like to know a lot, and I'm like, if you was to tell you what happens in Drive, you might be like, oh, whatever.
That sounds like a standard
But
movie.
if you just, it all depends on how it's handled in the film. So definitely go see it. Don't listen to any spoilers because why would you want to hear us do a stupid spoiler discussion poorly versus seeing this film that he's worked on probably for who knows how long. So
yeah, so
6 months.
Yeah,
wow.
so maybe. So now we'll get into spoilers for us. So if you haven't seen the movie, make sure to jump out now because I don't think you want it spoiled. So so going through the movie, so the beginning. When you have the sequence when young Adelaide goes into the kind of mystery house thing at the beach.
Vision Quest.
That was a sequence that people in the theater reacted to quite a bit when like there was the mirror image that turned around. So you kind of get that little setup in the beginning. But one of my problems was I think you got that setup in the beginning that something happened and you don't know what till the very end. But once it actually happens, like, well, that was kind of what I was expecting. I mean, there wasn't a lot of foreshadowing and it doesn't make a lot of sense that wouldn't have come up earlier in the movie in the conversation between her and Red. Like,
I don't think she didn't realize it. She suppressed that memory. I think that was the point of it, was that she actually didn't realize until the end of the film when she's in the car.
Yeah.
I think that all of a sudden that hit her.
Well,
that you know what I mean? I think because she was fused, she already kind of maybe shared some of that past.
But to me, it did make a ton of sense that Red wouldn't have brought that up more specifically.
Yes.
When sitting
you
there
guys brought that up in
discussing
the chat with Carlos.
Because just saying, like, hey, you stole my life.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, it's like, because the idea for the movie is that somebody, I guess the government or like a agency or an Illuminati group or something, created essentially like doubles or clones of everyone. And they thought that since they're tethered to the person that it's a double of, that they would somehow be able to influence or control people. And they were keeping them in all the abandoned mine shafts and subway tunnels and such that are around the United States. And that was where they were kept. But then at some point, the program didn't work, so they just kind of abandoned it. And people were just kind of left to wander around and eat like the lab rabbits that they had. And when the switcheroo happened and Adelaide actually got brought down and Red left and went out with the family, then she was able to show everyone that she was different through like a dance performance. I guess it showed that she had more like...
Suspiria.
Well, she had more like a full personality and intelligence and agency, and she wasn't just kind of the half that didn't have the human elements. But part of that is like nature and nurture, where all the people basically nonverbal because they grew up in an environment where there wasn't someone teaching them.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's the reason that the reverse happened, that when, the actual Adelaide went down there, she was then able to teach people things and convince them to do stuff for her. And then when Red went out and then became Adelaide or whatever when the switch happened, since she was integrated back into a normal family and got to go to school and all this therapy stuff, then she reached her potential being an intelligent person that, goes to college and has a job and family.
Thematically, I'm watching the film like, okay, obviously this is, the position is, it is like people are disadvantaged oftentimes because of their environment through no fault of their own. Because you see this person who was a shadow and maybe not a full person, because she was able to be put into a family with opportunities, she thrived. Just like if somebody is having to, live in maybe in a lower income part of town, you know what I mean? If they're more disadvantaged, then they have that much harder time succeeding. Where as far as this goes, it's showing that like somebody who's disadvantaged, just because they're disadvantaged doesn't mean they can't thrive. It means their environment is the reason they can't thrive. So this person or the shadow who you thought would have no ability to ever become anything else but just like basically oppressed underground, was actually able to thrive. So it's your environment actually does change your outcome.
So something I just thought of that's kind of a parallel. So Twin Peaks: The Return, the shadows were all kind of Dougie Joneses.
Yeah.
And they should have just stuck a fork in the light socket. If you've watched Twin Peaks: The Return. But
so do you get what I'm saying here? Does that make sense what I'm saying, William?
Yeah.
Because I have a second part to that. So, again, like the point is, hey, people are disadvantaged. If they are put in situations where they can thrive, they will thrive.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to judge somebody just because they have not succeeded in if they've been brought up in a terrible environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No fault of their own. But it's almost. But there's also another flip side that it's like, well, thematically, what is he saying? Because it's almost like turning those people into villains. It's like, is everybody disadvantaged now a villain? Because all of them came out as killers.
There's the line too of, who are you? It's like, we're Americans.
Yeah.
So there's like the element too is like, is America our own worst enemy?
Yeah. And
there's some of that type of stuff in there too. And then, there's kind of like all this stuff about Hands Across America that comes into play. Because, like something that, a small child saw in the 80s on TV and they were exposed to. Too, like in the beginning when she's watching TV, there's the VHS tapes on both sides of TV, and like one of them's Chud. So you have like the underground
cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Which... So you have, but wasn't actually something else in the movie. It was like a different program that I'm trying to remember, like in Chud, because wasn't that what it was? Like that's what we already thought about, like the monsters. It was actually like the program that made all that happen or something. Yeah. But you have like underground stuff happening, and then I'm trying to remember what the other movies were. That were around it, because there was Nightmare on Elm Street was in there, I think.
I couldn't tell for sure. I thought one might have been The Great Outdoors, but
I mean, there's some non-horror stuff in there too.
Because I have that VHS and it looked kind of like it.
But you have like the idea that like what a kid would then grow up to want to accomplish.
Yeah.
As an adult in an area where they're underground with a bunch of people that don't have much, education or intellect, so they're mostly operating on basic, human urges and naturalistic desires, and to the idea that you're tethered, so that if you're, if you're the shadow of someone that's out in the real world and they meet somebody, then that version of that person and you then have to get together. Like a lot of that stuff, that's where logically a lot of it doesn't really hang together or make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make much sense.
Because if the idea, and I think, that chat we had, Carlos even mentioned this, like if the idea was this was just in the Santa Cruz, that one town, which was also where Lost Boys was at. So
which I think they alluded to shooting in the flashback. Did you hear that? They said, there's something shooting over here. We can be extras.
Yeah. So the idea, if it was just this one town and the residents of this one town, but then it also means that like Gabe had to be somebody that was from that town, not somebody she met in college or whatever. Because he had the Howard University.
Which, I mean, he could have went to college there. And
I mean, it doesn't really lay out exactly where all that, but just like the logistics, a lot of that is kind of, when you sit there and think about it, that's what kind of breaks your brain a little bit.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
That was actually the point I brought up to Carlos, too, in that group, that I was, the Blake Snyder, I listened to the audiobook of Save the Cat. There is one rule, I think, let's see here, what section of it? Immutable laws of screenplay physics. Again, these are rules that he believes. Yeah. There are no rules.
Screenwriter. It's so somebody wrote a book about screenwriting.
So, and he learned this rule from Steven Spielberg, and it made me think of the film where I think it maybe could have been stronger in that regard. if it would have been more locally kept. But essentially, Steven Spielberg, he wrote a script, and it was about a family who like gets mutant powers almost, or they can do. It's called Nuclear Family because they all got radioactive, and they can do like
the Fantastic
things
Four.
better. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But like one's like very smart. She's exceeding in school and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But they were like, oh, well, maybe the press found out about it, and that's how they discover their powers or get discovered. And Steven Spielberg said no, like we're not. Don't bring the press into it. And essentially, because I think they were talked about doing that with E.T. I mean, I know at the end of the film, I don't know if there is, but he said, you'll notice there's no news crews in E.T. Just because that almost breaks the fourth wall, because then you start thinking about all the other realities and what that will do to the world and everything else. And he brought up the fact that Signs, there's a scene where they're sitting there watching TV.
Yeah.
And as great as that one scare is, he's like, what does this matter? You're just watching this family and you're getting really this doesn't really concern them as far as their specific situation. And it would almost strengthen it if they were like the only ones dealing with it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but
just because and you don't have to think about the outside logistics of all of it, because it makes the scope smaller.
Yeah.
So there's less room to ask a bunch of what if questions.
Yeah, because I think that, so this movie, you get the reveal that essentially this is all across the country and it's all happening in a coordinated fashion. And, so a lot of people are getting stabbed and killed, quickly. So that's another element too, where, if you take the logistics into account, if they're literally just
not in the southern states.
I was going to say, if they're using just like shears or scissors to go and stab people, there's some, like, if everybody just has, like, bladed weapons that aren't even that long, if they go against the police, unless they're super close quarters, they're going down.
Do you think there's some militia where their shadows are in Confederate uniforms and Confederate weapons?
I mean, so then that's just like one of the logistic things where, but like thematically, if it was just like the one family dealing with it, then it makes it more grounded. I get the concept of kind of pulling out as you get more and more towards the end and saying, oh, this is not just an isolated incident.
Honestly, I love that imagery at the end, and I think it was on the whole probably worth it. But so the thing about the TV too, watching that, I was thinking about it while watching the film, and I was like, is this really necessary? And I don't think so. I think the audience would have been fine if this stuff even would have been revealed naturally. Like they could have just been out and said, oh God, there's a whole line of people. You know what I mean?
The one element that kind of the thing that accomplished in the movie was it explained why the police never showed up. And because they had called the cops and they said it was going to be 14 minutes. And I guess if it was kind of coordinated and it was all starting to happen everywhere, then it makes sense that initially it's kind of standard operating procedure, but then things get so crazy.
But I think you could have, by the end of the film, seeing the line of them, you know what I mean? Not even when the final shot of the film, just you couldn't, they discovered later on, like they saw the line that they saw in the news.
Yeah.
So in your mind, you could have done the math backwards and like, oh, that's why they never came. Things went crazy.
Well, what should have happened was they're stabbing her. Then stab me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. And then just do a pan out, and that's how
so the elements too, so Winston Duke's character Gabe, I did like that they had it initially early in the movie, like once the invasion starts, he gets his knee bashed with the baseball bat. So then he is not the quickest, most agile member of the family, so it makes sense that he's not the one that's doing all this stuff that requires someone to run, because otherwise he's bigger than most of the people they're going against.
Yeah, I loved the whole sequence with him and his shadow on the boat and everything, but I was upset that his shadow got taken out so early.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, there could have been a lot more.
But I think otherwise, if his shadow being an imposing physical presence, unless you killed Gabe then the rest of the movie kind of becomes unbalanced, I think.
And I love, to touch on Tim Heidecker and
Elizabeth Moss.
Sorry. Yeah. I think they was great because honestly, watching them, in a version of this film, they would have been the white family.
No, yes,
you know
because
what I mean?
And if you had made this movie 15 years ago, roles are
last year without Jordan Peele,
or no, whatever. Yeah, if you made this movie, if you made this movie at any point, really, and it wasn't Jordan Peele directing it or another director who wasn't a white man, you would have had the reverse, where it's the white family who's your leads, and then the friend family that's just kind of mid-movie cannon fodder would be the non-white family.
Yeah.
And I just love that they just kind of there and they're kind of aloof, and they even have like it's vodka o'clock, like this kind of just annoying tendencies. But then again, like I think I've been somewhere and said something like that. It's like, oh, it's beer 30.
Oh, I know. Exactly. Yeah. Even when he's like, his wife wants something, he's like, what do you say? You know, just like he's a total.
I really like that. I really like that they just kind of get brutally murdered.
Yeah.
And then there is that one moment where Elizabeth Moss's double is in like looking at the window and like kind of at first like screaming because like her double husband is getting killed or, you know, in a battle. And then she goes from that to like laughing in one take, and it's like that was like just shows you like the weirdness that's going on with all these doubles or shadows.
Yeah.
But yeah, like once you go into the lab, some of the stuff doesn't make as much sense. Like, so how much space was there? Like, how did they have clothes that match what the people had up top? And
yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that at the end, when you actually think about it, I think can pull you out of it.
But I mean like maybe there is some larger description.
If you're the audience that cares about the specific details, you know, some people are, and I think he was probably aware of that and just thought, hey man,
thematic.
If some people don't dig this. This is what I want to do. That's fine.
Well,
but
and
there'll be some that are.
I appreciate if somebody's they're going to go all in and go for thematics and purpose over logistics. Because that's something where, in turn, I slightly had gripes with like The Last Jedi because I felt it did that a lot, where it kind of went for thematic things over like what's actually happening.
There's a fine line too, though, because he also sets up the almost the logical possibility of how this happened, because you set up the film saying, hey, there's tunnels all underground. It wasn't like they didn't know what was going on, then we just saw some tunnels, and then it's all across America. Like, I think it could have worked like that as well.
The one thing is, were the white people super, super pale? I can't remember. Because I feel like they should have been, like, ultra pale, like, almost no pictures.
Oh, you mean like underground?
Yeah, you've been underground for 30 years.
I feel like...
they would be, like, go out in the sun, like, they couldn't see anything. Yeah. You know, it'd be like Sandra Bullock in the other movies, they're walking around with their hand out in front of them.
That's why they came at night, man. So they had time to adjust. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because there's a lot that's not that clear. Like, did they ever get to go out? Like, because the little girl got to go out at the beginning, so...
Yeah. The ending of this reminded me of another Karen Kusuma film. She did Jennifer's Body. It's not the end of that, but I don't know if you've seen any of her films, William.
I'm trying to remember which ones. Like, I've seen The Invitation. Okay. I've seen some other stuff. So, I mean, but yeah, like, so the movie I thought was more heavy on thematics than it was on the logistical concerns.
But they also kind of try to explain it logistic. You know what I mean?
I'm pretty sure
in trouble is if you start divulging too far into like how this is possible, then you kind of let yourself open for criticism.
Well, if you just
it's not possible.
Yeah, if you just go with it.
Yeah,
then,
if you kind of, I don't know the right answer.
I'm sure
he's making $70 million.
No, it's
critical praise. Like, I have no room to talk, but I'm just saying it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, it's just whenever you're somebody that has looked into the art of screenwriting and the science behind it and the steps and everything, it does make you think about things a little bit differently, unfortunately. So people who are filmmakers or interested in filmmaking often come at things from a perspective that's different than the person just plops their seat down their seat and watches a movie and is like, this made me feel something this didn't. So that you have that kind of difference in how people
and real quick too, honestly, this was mostly made me feel, I laughed a whole lot and just super enjoyable. Yeah. And I, maybe I haven't had a lot of a repressed trauma. You know what I mean? Some people, it really did hit them on that level.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't hit me certainly in the heart too much as like even Get Out did. You know what I mean? As far as feeling sympathy. But real quick, like I saw, Captain Marvel, and that was a film where I think the choices were interesting, but it didn't hit me. You know what I mean? So I totally get what you're saying there as far as it doesn't hit you on a gut level. This hit me enough on the gut level, but also was something interesting.
Yeah, so I still enjoyed the movie a lot.
I enjoyed it.
And I think just having a lot to talk about after it ends is a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I say. Like, I think I enjoy movies like this because, like, Halloween, it was a movie.
Well,
and there was no discussion after it.
Yeah, they did some weird things, but okay. So William, you got to wrap it up, right?
Yep.
All right. So thank you guys for let us know in the comments.
Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments.
I'm sure there will be much talk about this film until 30 years from now.
The next episode will be Bubba Hotep. So thanks for listening to the House of Esor podcast. We're out.